The artist, Shiga Naoya. Shiga Naoya, 1883–1971, is a celebrated Japanese short story writer of the 20th century. He wrote very sensitively about his people and their culture. The artist unfurls before us the world of a talented Japanese boy, Saibei. It shows how the adult world often causes damage to such talents. Saibei's parents knew that he often went out to buy himself goods. He got them for a few sen and soon had a sizable collection. When he came home, he would first bore a neat hole in the top of the gourd and extract the seeds. Next he applied tea leaves to get rid of the unpleasant gourd smell. He then fetched the sake which he had saved up from the dregs in his father's cup and carefully polished the surface. Saibei was passionately interested in gourds. One day as he was strolling along the beach, absorbed in his favorite subject, he was startled by an unusual sight. He caught a glimpse of the bald, elongated head of an old man hurrying out of one of the huts by the beach. What a splendid gourd, thought Saibei. The old man disappeared from sight, wagging his bald pine pate. Only then did Saibei realize his mistake and he stood there laughing loudly to himself. He laughed all the way home. Whenever he passed a grocery, a curio shop, a confectioner's or in fact any place that sold goods, he stood for minutes on end, his eyes glued to the wind appraising the precious fruit. Saibei was 12 years old and still at primary school. After class, instead of playing with the other children, he usually wandered about the town looking for gourds. Then in the evening he would sit cross-legged in the corner of the living room working on his newly acquired fruit. When he had finished treating it, he poured in a little sake, inserted a cork stopper which he had fashioned himself, wrapped it in a towel, put this in a tin especially kept for the purpose and finally placed the whole thing in the charcoal footwarmer. Then he went to bed. As soon as he woke the next morning, he would open the tin and examine the gourd. The skin would be thoroughly damp from the overnight treatment. Saibei would gaze adoringly at his treasure before tying a string round the middle and hanging it in the sun to dry. Then he set out for school. Saibei lived in a harbor town. Although it was officially a city, one could walk from one end to the other in a matter of 20 minutes. Saibei was always wandering about the streets and had soon come to know every place that sold goods and to recognize almost every gourd on the market. He did not care much about the old, gnarled, peculiarly formed gourds usually favored by collectors. The type that appealed to Saibei was even and symmetrical. That youngster of yours only seems to like the ordinary-looking ones, said a friend of his father, who had come to call. He pointed at the boy, who was sitting in the corner busily polishing a plain, round gourd. Fancy a lad spending his time playing around like that with gourds, said his father, giving Saibei a disgusted look. See here, Saibei my lad, said the friend, there's no use just collecting lots of those things. It's not the quantity that counts, you know. What you want to do is to find one or two really unusual ones. I prefer this kind, said Saibei and let the matter drop. Saibei's father and his friend started talking about gourds. Remember that Bakin gourd they had at the agricultural show last spring? Said his father. It was a real beauty, wasn't it? Yes, I remember. That big, long one. As Saibei listened to their conversation, he was laughing inwardly. The Bakin gourd had made quite a stir at the time, But when he had gone to see it, having no idea, of course, who Bakin might be, he had found it rather a stupid-looking object and had walked out of the show. I didn't think so much of it, interrupted Saibei, it's just a clumsy great thing. His father opened his eyes wide in surprise and anger. What's that? He shouted. When you don't know what you're talking about, you'd better shut up. Saibei did not say another word. One day when he was walking along an unfamiliar back street, he came upon an old woman with a fruit stall. She was selling dried persimmons and oranges. On the shutters of the house behind the stall, she had hung a large cluster of gourds. Can I have a look? Said Saibei, and immediately ran behind the stall and began examining the gourds. Suddenly he caught sight of one which was about 5 inches long and at first sight looked quite commonplace. Something about it made Shabi's heart beat faster. How much is this one? He asked, panting out the words. 10 senator. Well, said the old woman, since you're just a lad, I'll let you have it for. In that case, said Saibei urgently, please hold it for me, won't you? I'll be right back with the money. He dashed home and in no time at all was back at the stall. He bought the gourd and took it home. From that time on, he was never separated from his new gourd. He even took it along to school and used to polish it under his desk in class time. It was not long before he was caught at this by one of the teachers, who was particularly incensed because it happened to take place in an ethics class. The teacher came from another part of Japan and found it most offensive that children should indulge in such effeminate pastimes as collecting gourds. He never minded having his students sing Nanawabushi ballads, however raucously. Now, when he found Saibei silently polishing his gourd, his voice trembled with fury. You're an idiot, he shouted. There's absolutely no future for a boy like you. Then and there he confiscated the gourd on which Saibei had spent so many long hours of work. Saibei stared straight ahead and did not cry. When he got home, Saibei's face was pale. Without a word, he put his feet on the warmer and sat looking blankly at the wall. After a while, the teacher arrived. As Saibei's fatna was not yet home from the carpenter's shop where he worked, the teacher directed his attack on Saibei's mother. This sort of thing is the responsibility of the family, he said in a stern voice. It's the duty of you parents to see that such things don't happen. In an agony of embarrassment, Saibei's mother muttered some apology. Meanwhile, Saibei was trying to make himself as inconspicuous as possible in the corner. Terrified, he glanced up at his vindictive teacher and at the wall directly behind, where a whole row of fully prepared gourds was hanging. What would happen if the teacher caught sight of them? Trembling inside, he waited for the worst, but at length the man exhausted his rhetoric and stamped angrily out of the house. Saibei heaved a sigh of relief. Saibei's mother was sobbing softly. In a querulous whine, she began to scold him, and in the midst of this, Saibei's father returned from his shop. As soon as he heard what had happened, he grabbed his son by the collar and gave him a sound beating. You're no good, he bawled at him. You'll never get anywhere in the world, the way you're carrying on. I've a good mind to throw you out into the street where you belong. The gourds on the wall caught his attention. Without a word, he fetched his hammer and systematically smashed them to pieces, one after the other. Saibei turned pale but said nothing. The next day the teacher gave Saibe's confiscated gourd to an old porter who worked in the school. "Here, take this," he said, as if handing over some unclean object. The porter took the gourd home with him and hung it on the wall of his small, sooty room. About 2 months later, the porter, finding himself even more hard-pressed for money than usual, decided to take the gourd to a local curio shop to see if he could get a few coppers for it. The curio dealer examined the gourd carefully, then assuming an uninterested tone handed it back to the porter, saying, "I might give you 5 yen for it." The porter was astounded, but being quite an astute old man, replied coolly, "I certainly wouldn't part with it for that." The dealer immediately raised his offer to 10 yen, but the porter was still adamant. In the end the curio dealer had to pay 50 yen for the gourd. The porter left the shop, delighted at his luck. It wasn't often that the teachers gave one a free gift equivalent to a year's wages. He was so clever as not to mention the matter to anyone, and neither Saibe nor the teacher ever heard what had happened to the gourd. Yes, the porter was clever, but he was not clever enough. Little did he imagine that this same gourd would be passed on by the curio dealer to a wealthy collector in the district for 600 yen. Saibe is now engrossed in his pictures. He no longer feels any bitterness either towards the teacher, or towards his father who smashed all his precious goods to pieces. Yet gradually his father has begun to scold him for painting pictures.